I love Randbats. A lot of people do in fact, and it's the most popular format on Pokemon Showdown for a reason, putting up numbers that OU and VGC can only dream of. A lot of people think of it as a purely casual format, but what a lot of people don't know is that it has a huge tournament player base on Smogon. Every year, as a part of the Randbats circuit, people play in tournaments throughout the entire year, grinding points and hoping to be one of the 32 players that makes it to the playoffs bracket at the end of the year and becomes the world champion. Last year, I was one of those players, and with hard work and a little luck, I made it all the way to Grand Finals, where I lost to Michael the Best. Oh well, second place isn't too bad, and I managed to achieve a lot elsewhere. I spent time in the top 5 of Gen 9 Randbats and number 1 on some old gen ladders. I top cut this year's Gen 9 Open, and I ended last year's RBTT, the biggest team tournament, with a positive record, and more. I don't bring this up to brag, but rather just to show that I'm qualified to do this video, where I'll give you 5 pro tips that I've learnt on my way to the top, and that you can implement to improve your performance on the Randbats ladder. So, like and subscribe, and we'll get right into it. Alright, so first off, I'm going to give you one tip that's super easy to implement, and that's to download an extension. There are a few of them that people use, like the Randbats tooltip, but in my opinion the best option is Shodex, because not only is it useful in general to always have a calc, but it actually has the Randbats tooltip built into it. It's not cheating or anything, it just pulls from the random battle set data on the Pokemon Showdown GitHub, and I can promise you that 99% of good players are using an extension like this. In some team tournaments, I've even heard of managers requiring their players to use one, just because it's so useful. The only player I can think of who doesn't use it is Michael, just because he has all the information baked into his brain already. But unless you're a prodigy, you really should use one. It's super simple. With Shodex, for example, all you have to do is click these tabs and it'll show you all the possible move options, ability options, terra options, item options, and a percentage chance of each one. This top right tab, the set tab, is especially important. Pokemon and Randbats can have multiple roles that they can be. Like a Sandslash, for example, can be a bulky support set with Stealth Rock and Rapid Spin, or a setup sweeper set with Swords Dance and Stone Edge. Some roles can't generate with certain moves, abilities, or items, so it's really important to use the information you have to figure out what role the enemy Pokemon can and can't be, so you can get rid of as much hidden information as you can. Basically, if there's one thing you take away from this video, let it be this. It's the easiest way to instantly up your game, and almost all the best players use this. The second tip I can give is that hazards are insanely important. The first thing I do every single game, no matter what, is to check every Pokemon on my team for hazards, as well as hazard removal like Rapid Spin. It doesn't matter whether it's Stealth Rock, Spikes, Toxic Spikes, Sticky Web, it'll give you a big advantage. Randbats in general feels more balanced than you'd think for a randomized metagame, but a few games that feel absolutely hopeless are usually caused when my opponent has hazards and I don't. There's a couple reasons for this. For one, heavy duty boots are just much less common in Randbats than they are in standard formats, so on average, you're going to get more damage from the hazards you set up. Secondly is the fact that it forces your opponent to rush their game plan, because when you can switch freely and they can't, slow games become unfavourable for them. And thirdly is the fact that unlike OU, where basically everyone has a Great Tusk, Cinderace or Corviknight, your opponent is pretty unlikely to have access to hazard removal, so it's much harder for hazards to be punished or denied. Toxic Spikes in particular are game winning in the right matchup, since poison isn't the most common type in the grand scheme of things, so removing them can be a struggle, but all hazards are valuable. It's to the point where if I'm playing Gen 8 Randbats and I have a Copperajah, I'll Dynamax it to get the steel hazards 99% of the time. Obviously, use common sense. If there's a major threat to your team in front of you, kill it. Don't let something click Shell Smash when you click Stealth Rock, because that won't end well. And don't sacrifice everything on your entire team to get a million layers that don't matter when you only have 3 Pokemon to their 6. But the point still stands. Never take a risk with your hazard setter. Always find a way to get them in safely against something that doesn't threaten them, and it'll pay dividends later in the battle. The next piece of advice I want to give you is to always preserve as much as you can. With no team preview, Randbats is a format all about hidden information. It gives you a big advantage if you can figure out your opponent's full team before they can figure out yours, because it lets you start forming a complete game plan. Similarly, it's really important not to just throw away Pokemon for no reason. For all you know, your opponent could have a scary Shell Smash user in the back, and that Pokemon you let take massive damage was your only counter. Stuff like that happens all the time, and trying to speedrun a battle is a major mistake I see new players make constantly. Sometimes it works to play super aggressively, obviously, especially if your team happens to have a good matchup against the opponent. But if you're in a situation where the matchup is more equal or even bad for you, then it's going to make it very hard to win when you've burnt all your resources going for super aggressive plays and trades early in the game. The same applies to big resources like Terra or Dynamax. You usually want to be the person to use it second. Now, obviously, if you have a slow hazard setter at 20% HP, like a Spidops or something, then the correct play is to sacrifice it for momentum. But in general, the only situation where I would recommend playing super fast and going all in like this is if your opponent has a lot of hazards or toxic spikes or something, and you don't have a good counter or hazards of your own, because that will make a slower paced game more difficult for you. But otherwise, don't bet the farm on your first opportunity. It's almost always better to just wait and see what options your opponent is working with. I promise. So, this tip is related to the previous tip, and it's to identify and preserve your highest speed option. This doesn't have to be the literal speed stat for the record. Obviously, if you have something like a Regieleki, that's a good choice, but it can also be a strong priority user like Scizor, a choice scarf user like Mabostiff, or a Pokemon that can boost its speed like Cloyster. Basically, whatever is most likely to be attacking first. The reason I say this is related to the previous tip is because when the best strategy is preserving as many tools as you can because of all the hidden info, a lot of endgames and random battles will contain a lot of Pokemon that have taken a substantial amount of chip damage. Even though a Pokemon like Zebstrika is a lot weaker than a Pokemon like Nidoking, if both can get the kill, then Zebstrika is always going to be the better choice, since its superior speed lets it beat more things. Because of this, it's usually better to use wall breakers like Hoopa Unbound or Ursaluna earlier in the game. Obviously, this is only a rule of thumb, and Pokemon is not so black and white. Unless you're playing Gen 5, of course.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Alright, but seriously, jokes aside, when you're checking for hazards at the start of the battle, I would recommend just making a note of what your fastest option is, and try to preserve it and keep it hidden if you can. Speed is the most important Pokemon stat in general. That's why Sticky Web is so good. So if you can maintain a speed advantage, it'll make your endgames much more consistent. Alright, so the last tip for this video is going to be a simple one, and it's just to learn the rules for set generation. In case you didn't know, random battles don't just pick 6 random Pokédex numbers and give them to you. There's a lot of rules implemented into the code to make it more balanced. I'll leave a link to the full explanation post in the description, but here are some of the most important ones you should know. First off, you can only have 2 Pokemon of a certain type on your team. So if you kill 2 fire types on your opponent's team and you have a Scizor in the back, it means Scizor is a much stronger win condition. You can also only have 3 Pokemon weak to a certain type. So, if you see 3 Rock, Steel, or Dark types, all of which are weak to fighting, you can click something like Spec Shadow Ball on Dragapult, because you know your opponent almost certainly doesn't have a normal type that can come in. Some other rules exist, like no 2 Pokemon can share a 4 times weakness, but that stuff isn't as useful. In general, these situations are niche, but at a top level, any amount of information you can get about what your opponent's last Pokemon might be can make your endgames a little more consistent. There are some more generation-specific rules as well. In Gen 9, only 1 Pokemon is allowed to have the Terra Blast roll. This means, if you see your opponent use Terra Blast, then later bring in Frosmoth, you know for a fact that it will be the Hurricane or Giga Drain set. And in Generation 6 and 7, if the opponent only has 1 Pokemon that can Mega, it will always be the Mega set. If they have multiple, an easy way to check is via the level balancing. If their Mawile is level 68, you know it'll be a Mega. But if it's level 82, it'll probably be more of a defensive oriented set with Leftovers, Intimidate, and Stealth Rock. This tip isn't as important as the rest, and only becomes really important at the top level where every bit of info counts, but it's still worth keeping in mind. Anyway, that's all for this video. My biggest tip is just to have fun and keep playing, since that's the best way to improve at anything. But I hope at least one piece of advice here was helpful for you, and hopefully, I'll see you all at the top of the ladder soon. Peace out.